My name is Felista Silman. I'm here at Technical University Berlin, and I have the pleasure to present you a webinar I have organized together with Howard Duncan. Hi, Howard. Howard is at Carleton University in Canada. And I have prepared a little introduction into our webinar. It is the fourth webinar we present in the Canadian-German webinar series. The title is Navigating the Arrangements of Entrance and Settlement, Germany and Canada in Comparative Perspective. And please let me say some words why we do those webinars. It's part of a larger project, which is a structured exchange on migration and integration between Germany and Canada. And our webinar series supports this process of structured exchange. So we want to focus on entangled issues of migration and integration in a comparative perspective. We want to highlight the chances of proactive migration governance. We want to offer food for thought through international comparison, and we want to step away from a nation-centric frame of analysis. We had 3 webinars on the governance of welcome, on the situation of the Ukrainian refugees, on sponsorship models, and today we look on navigating the arrangements of entrance and settlement, as we thought it's an important topic. We will have rather short pitches focusing on main arguments. We have overviews on the current discussion rather than a deep dive. We have chosen and asked 7 speakers, and I'm very honored to have them here. They will give us insights in short statements about 7 to 8 minutes. What are the questions? We will concentrate on the way countries accept let-in people on visa policy, on the basis of visa policies and bureaucracies of settlement and integration. Both countries have a capillary system of services, and we asked, how do the differences look like? What does the excess imply for later labor market integration and the local infrastructure? What is the role of intermediary actors for settlement and integration? We ask our speakers to concentrate on numbers of entrants and labor market allocation. We ask them to explain us how the step from the visa to the workplace works. How is it regulated? And then we want to see how the integration into the labor market is structured. What is the role of NGOs in the regional setting? We come up with a close-up on practices and a conclusion. And before I hand over to my colleague Howard, I want to introduce you into the German side of the speakers. So we have 7 speakers. 3 are from Germany, and I want to welcome very much Mr. Herbert Brücker. He's at IAB Nuremberg and at Humboldt University Berlin at BIM. He's one of the major experts we have in Germany on numbers and on labor market integration. Herbert, wonderful to have you here. We have then Professor Dr. Tuan Nguyen. He's at the University of Applied Labor Studies, Schwerin and Mannheim, which is supplement, I think, of the German Agency for Labor. And we have Thorsten Schlee. He's at the University of Duisburg-Essen, and he's head of research field on social policies and migration. And I hand over to Howard, please.
Thank you, Felicitas. It's good to be here and good to see you all. I want to thank you, Felicitas, and your colleague Anna for working in such a dedicated way on this through the networking unit paradigm shift, which grew out of the Metropolis conference that was held in Berlin almost 2 years ago. And one of the nice results of that conference has been a continuing collaboration through what we affectionately call the NUPS network, and in particular, a specific collaboration between Canada and Germany. And I think that it's important for our two countries to compare our experiences and compare our responses to immigration. We do have a considerable amount to learn from each other. Although at first blush, you might think that we're actually quite the same because we both have quite substantial numbers of immigrants coming in each year. We both support this. Both countries favor a robust immigration program. But it's in the details that things appear differently. And I think it's important that we understand these details because in both cases, we're trying to adapt to ever-changing circumstances to, quite frankly, do a better job in managing migration for the benefit of our countries and for the benefit of the immigrants who come to live among us. So today what we'll be looking at is not only policy, which tends to get, when we talk in these terms, policy tends to dominate, but to a certain extent, what we're going to be looking at today is operations or administrative details. And I think that these are often bypassed in these conversations. And so I think often where governments make changes in their programming has to do with these administrative details, their operational matters as opposed to broad level policy. So it's my pleasure to let you know who is going to be speaking from the Canadian side. So first up, we will hear from Professor Dan Hebert, who is now Professor Emeritus in the Geography Department at the University of British Columbia. He is also with the Canada Excellence Research Chair at the Toronto Metropolitan University and has, for the last number of years, been one of the principal advisors to the Deputy Minister of the Department of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship here in Ottawa. We'll then hear from Professor Athar Akbari, who is with the Economics Department at St. Mary's University, which is located in Halifax in Canada. Athar was one of those who joined the Metropolis Project, I believe, as a graduate student a number of years ago, studying with somebody else from Vancouver, Don Dvoritz, and has made quite a career in looking at specifically the economics of migration in the Atlantic region of Canada. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Melissa Kelly, who is also with the Canada Excellence Research Chair at Toronto Metropolitan University. And I would characterize Melissa, who I've known for many years, partly through her connection with Carleton University, as one of Canada's emerging stars in the immigration field. And finally, from Canada, we have Juliet Smith, with whom I had the pleasure of working going back a number of months. And she is the head of the employment section of the Ottawa Chinese Community Service Center in Ottawa. And one thing that I think is fascinating about the work that Julia does is that even though the organization refers to the Chinese community, they do indeed serve all immigrant communities in Ottawa. And in my view, they are doing some innovative, significantly innovative work in this area, the area of enabling newcomers to find employment, including among the innovations, the use of artificial intelligence. So I'm very happy that we have such a fine representation from Canada. And Felicitas, I will now turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Howard, for your very nice presentation of the scholars. We will start with our first speaker, which is Mr. Herbert Brücker. And Herbert, we are very pleased that you speak with us for us today. Please take your time.
Okay, many thanks for inviting me. I'm delighted to participate in this meeting. And given the limitation of time, I'm starting right away. What I plan to do in my brief talk is to, I think that my job here to establish a common ground on migration and labor market figures in Germany, but I will briefly also comment on the recent legal changes we have had, because it might be relevant for the later discussion of the institutional framework. May I have the next slide, please? The situation at the outset is that Germany is, most OECD countries, heavily affected by demographic change. We will lose in a counterfactual scenario without migration. We will always have migration, so it's a counterfactual scenario. About 1/3 of our labor 2070. That means that the labor force will shrink by 17 million people. And we are able to stabilize the labor force if we have a net migration of 400,000 individuals per year, and that is equivalent to 1.6 million arrivals due to return migration. Brief remark was migration statistics is different from Canada, so those relationship between net migration and post-migration is not totally comparable. Still, even if you have a net migration of 400,000 individuals, the age dependency ratio will increase by 80 percentage points. So we needed Germany even more to deal with demographic change. We also observe that the labor market tightness has increased from 800,000 vacancies, open positions, to almost 1.8 million open positions in 2023, not 2030, sorry, and it will increase further. I guess we will have in 2 years or so more open positions than unemployed individuals in Germany. And the labor market in Germany is characterized by a huge labor market demand at the upper and at the lower end of the skill spectrum. So we have a polarization here. That means we need a lot of individuals with academic degrees, but we have also very high demand for individuals without vocational training degrees. And we have a lower, less than proportional demand for individuals with vocational training. And what we also do observe, I think that for many OECD countries, that we have a replacement of routine tasks by non-routine tasks. Yeah, so what we do observe that those manual jobs tend to increase as well as cognitive analytical non-routine tasks. Now that's a general trend in the labor market, and that affects also the structure of migration we need. May I have the next slide? I need the graph now, yeah. What you're going to see here on the slide is what happened during the last decade. What we do see that foreign employment has increased by a factor of 2.5. Now, we have never seen in German history such a huge increase in foreign employment, and that was particularly driven by employment of EU nationals. Okay, net migration is about 325,000 persons, but in the average since German unification, and it has increased to 550,000 individuals in the last decade. So that is much more than we need to stabilize the employment in Germany. But there have been extraordinary conditions. That was in particular the EU Eastern enlargement, but also, of course, refugee migration. And about 50%, and that's important for the understanding of what's going on in Germany, of the arrivals were EU nationals. And those EU nationals do not have any visa obligations, no residency permit obligations, so they can simply enter the country. Yeah? And most of our foreign labor force is coming from EU countries. About 50% entered the country as asylum seekers, humanitarian migrants, and 4% with an employment visa. And there's a problem. I come back to that in a minute. And the remainder by education channels, family reunification, and other channels. And if we look at population figures, then humanitarian migration is a bit larger and EU migration is a bit lower because we have higher return migration among EU migrants. The problem in Germany is that EU migration will tend to decline substantially. We stand in the moment at 1/3 of the peak that we have achieved in 2015 after the EU Eastern enlargement. And my estimate is that at the end of the decade, net migration will be close to zero from the European Union. And that has the implication that in the future, migrants in Germany have to come from third countries. May I have the next slide? Yeah, that is a breakdown, and for time reasons, I skip that. Let's see the development, which is heavily affected, of course, by refugee migration, the up and downs. But you can see also that the dark blue line, the migration, there looks pretty stable, but tends to decline already. May I have the next slide, please? Yeah, that is, here we get to our problem, that are the arrivals with an employment visa, and that they have substantially declined during the COVID pandemic and have increased thereafter. We stand in the moment at 70,000, a bit more than 70,000 people, and that is about 8% of the immigration of third country nationals and 4% of total immigration. And Canada, in proportion, if you believe in the OECD figures, stands at a relationship of about 30% of individuals who enter the country with an employment-related visa. Yeah, that I think is one of the key differences, although the figures are not completely comparable. Yeah, now the statistics are different. We have to keep that in mind, but that highlights what we have to do in Germany. May I have the next slide? And that is a breakdown of that 73,000 people. About 50% of those, or slightly more, came via entry panels or visa categories, which are related to higher qualification levels. And the other 50% or 45% came via channels where you do not have a qualification obligation, for example, via the Western Balkan rule. That is where we do stand in the moment. And what is important to note is that the individuals who enter Germany with an employment-related visa perform very well on the labor market. That holds also true for those who enter it with a visa which has no qualification obligations. There we observe employment rates of 90% or more of the population, much more than in the native population in Germany. The problem in Germany is that there are relatively few people. May I have the next slide? Yes, now that's my final slide on this slide before. A brief comment on the legal changes. It's clear for the government and all observers that Germany has to increase labor migration to deal with demographic change. And we have had a couple of legal changes. And the last legal changes was undertaken in the last year, and the steps of the changes become effective stepwise in this year. And there are two major changes. The first one is that individuals can receive a residence and employment permit without proof of the equivalence of their academic or vocational training degree if their salary exceeds a certain threshold level. That is very important because if you want to enter Germany, you have usually to prove that your foreign degree is equivalent the qualifications to an occupation in Germany. That is particularly difficult in vocational training, but also difficult for individuals with an academic degree. And I consider that as a major law for immigration in Germany. And you can circumvent that if your income is above a certain income level, but unfortunately the ceiling is pretty high. It's above the 75 percentile. And that has the implication that less than 25% of the people, we estimate about 15% of the people, have an income which is higher than the income ceiling which is requested. There's again an exception if the company is subject to collective bargaining, then you can skip that. But still, this income ceiling is pretty high, so that I'm afraid that will not work. The other major change is that we introduced a chance card, which is a card for job seekers via a complex point system. And under those conditions, you can stay in the country when you have found a job. That's something totally different than the point system in Canada. And I'm afraid also that that is not very attractive because job seekers use other visa categories to enter Germany and not that complex thing. And we have another minor change, the prolongation of the Western Balkan rule, and easier access for nurse assistants, for temporary workers, and so forth. All those make sense, but they will be not game changers. So I'm afraid that our legal framework, and as a consequence, all the institutional framework which follow the legal framework, will not work in practice, so that labor immigration might be too low, and that is particularly relevant because we lose our major source of foreign workers, and that is the European Union. Yeah, and that is a dramatic situation in which we stand in the moment. Okay, that was it from my side. Thank you so much, and I apologize for the technical problems.
Herbert, we have to apologize. Thank you so much for your concise insights into the situation at the moment. I mean, rather astonishing that we have only 4% of people coming with an employment visa. I think that's a very important point here. But I hand over immediately to Dan, who looks on the Canadian side, and I keep quiet. No.
Okay, thanks very much. And that was a really great scene setting from Herbert. I'm going to be less detailed. Mine will be more broader kind of brushstrokes about the Canadian situation. I'm going to concentrate on 3 points. First, I'll speak a little bit about the major challenges that Canada is facing. And there you'll see quite a lot of parallels with what we've just been told about Germany. Secondly, I'll talk about the immigration response to those challenges. And then thirdly, about the need to improve integration outcomes as part of this process. So those are my 3 main kinds of themes that I'll deal with. Hopefully 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and 3 minutes, if I can try to keep within time. So the first one is the big Canadian challenges. And those, first of all, come in the form of demographic challenges. In fact, Canada's demography is actually even more challenging than that of Germany. We had a bigger baby boom generation than Germany in terms of the relative size of Canada. And that is now retiring, which is making things very tight for the labor market. And secondly, we have the lowest level of fertility that we have ever seen in Canadian history, and it is actually much lower than that of Germany. The total fertility rate in Canada now is only 1.33 children per woman. I think in Germany it's about 1.5 still. So the challenge.
Not anymore.
Yeah, I think, yeah. And Canada also dropping very rapidly. So very big challenges there in the short term in keeping the labor market stocked with relevant people, in the longer term dealing with the issues of aging and public finances. We also have an acute economic challenge in Canada in the sense that Canada has seen stagnant productivity now for the last 8 years. There will be no increase in per capita gross domestic product in Canada from 2015 projected to 2025. So 10 years of no additional prosperity. in a country that has generally expected there to be prosperity increases over time. This is now stuck and is not happening. So this is quite a substantial challenge. And then the third challenge is social. We are dealing with a polarized political situation. We have historically low trust in government as solving the problems of Canadian society. And in part, this is, of course, related to the fact that prosperity has not been increasing. So those are the challenges. Then that's my first part. And I think that was about 2 minutes. Now I go to my second part, which is what is the response in terms of migration and immigration policy? The current government has made a kind of leap of faith. And the leap of faith is that immigration can solve these challenges. And so that has meant the Canadian government has really increased very substantially Canada's immigration system, both on the temporary side and on the permanent side. And the idea is this will solve the demographic problems, and it will solve the economic problems, and at the same time, it will be done in such a way that will keep social license, that will keep society on board and positive about these changes. And I have just two quick illustrations to show you. If I could get you, ask you to move to the next slide, please. This next slide, when it comes up, will show the change in both the permanent resident population and the temporary resident population of Canada. The slide isn't changing. It doesn't really matter. I will just simply tell you that both of these things are now larger than they have ever been in Canadian history. Oh, this was the slide that I was just speaking about that shows on the top the fact that permanent immigration as of 2023 is the highest it's ever been in Canada's history, and especially it is higher than it's been in the last 40 years, which this slide shows. And you can see it goes last year to about 470,000 persons per year, permanent immigrants in a country of 41 million. And then in the lower part of the slide, you can see an even more rapid, profound increase in the number of temporary residents in Canada. Last year, more than 1.6 million newcomers came as temporary residents to Canada. And this has led, and now can I ask you to go to the last slide, and hopefully this will work. This has led to an extraordinary rate of population growth in Canada in 2023 of 3.2%. And this slide, if it comes up, will show you the comparison between, perfect. Canada's growth rate is the red line, and all the other G7 countries are the other colored lines. In 2023, the average growth rate of the other G7 countries than Canada was 0.25%, while Canada's was 3.2%, 13 times higher than the other G7 countries. This has led to, by the way, in comparative context, Germany's big growth year of 2015 was 1.2% of the population. Canada's growth rate last year was 3.2%, almost 3 times as high. So that leads then to the next question, which is, and you can take the slides off now. I'm not going to talk to them anymore. The next question is, what does this present in terms of integration challenges? We've never seen this many people coming to Canada. There are short-term challenges of supporting this number of people entering the labor market. And there are long-term challenges, of course, of social integration and maintaining public support for the kind of immigration program that we now have. This means that Canada has to get immigration right. It has to do this in the most efficient and the most productive way possible. What does that look like? It means putting a huge amount of concentration on selection of immigrants. And I don't have time to talk about what that looks like, but a lot of attention needs to be there. Secondly, a lot of attention onto the settlement of immigration and the support for the incorporation of immigrants into the labor market and into society. And finally, this also entails cross-government, a whole-of-government approach, making sure that immigration policy is aligned with housing policy, with education policy, with health policy, and all of the other kinds of things that governments do. This necessitates very careful work between the national government and our regional level of government. In Canada, we call these provinces, as opposed to the Länder in Germany. Especially since it is our provincial governments who have the jurisdiction over the labor market, over professional accreditation, and over education systems. So they're incredibly important players, actors in this particular process. And I will finally leave you with one huge challenge. The huge challenge is, for the most part, immigrants that are admitted to Canada are brought because of their high human capital. At the same time, if you look at the demand in the Canadian labor market for new employees, the overwhelming majority of that demand is for low-skilled positions and occupations. So there is a disconnect between what Canadian employers are looking for and what the government is prioritizing in terms of the admission of immigrants. And I'm sure I've used up my 7 minutes. I will stop there and leave you with that particular challenge. Perhaps we can talk more about it in the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. We will speak more about regionalization, of course, and thank you so much for your insights here in the demographic, economic, and social setup of Canada. I immediately hand over to our next speaker, which is Professor Tuan Nguyen. On the German side, how to get into the system, what does it mean? And Tuan, will you show your slides yourself? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I will show my slides
Perfect.
self. I hope you can see the slides now. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, then I will.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the invitation, also the opportunity to give you an impulse about the chains of labor market integration in Germany. I will show the process and also procedure from visas for integration in around 7 minutes. Yeah, normally it takes around, I think, 2 years, and so or more. And so I will show you some impulse. Yeah. Okay, workers from third country, like, outside of the EU, who want to work in Germany, go through a series of administrative steps. Yeah, these following steps ensure that entry and work in Germany are legally protected, and integration is made easier. And so the first, what I would like to show you is here the steps in the home country. And second is the steps after entering Germany. And at the end also, I would just show you some challenge in this procedure. And so, first steps in the home country is the recognition of the professional qualifications. The applicants check whether their foreign qualification need to be recognized in Germany, which particularly applies to regulated professions such as nursing, medicine, teacher, or also engineer. It could be also other not regulated professions. Documents are submitted to the responsible recognition office in Germany, but this procedure can also sometimes be initiated already in the home country. The second step in the home country is securing a job. Applicants should look for a job that match their qualifications and experience. This can be done directly via job portals like Make It in Germany, or also the job portal of the Federal Employment Agency, but also possible via private and recruiting agencies and networks. The problem here is the private agencies, they take a fee, like, I know it from Vietnam. They take a fee from 5,000 euro to 15,000 euro for the service. Also, a valid employment contract is needed and required and must be presented when applying for a visa. Then the third step is the visa application in the home country. Depending on their qualifications and also employment contract, various types of visas are possible for applicants, including the visa for a qualified specialist or the EU blue card for highly qualified people. The visa application is usually made at the German embassy or consulate in the country of origin. The main requirements are an employment contract, proof of qualifications, and a valid passport. Then, now, if the people are entering Germany, there are also some steps. Here, the fourth step is the registration. Local residence registration office and local immigration office. They're both two different offices. After arriving in Germany, foreigner workers must register at the local residence registration office. They also must apply for a residence permit at the local immigration office. This is often linked to the visa, which can already include a work permit. Then the next step also is to ensure that you have also a health insurance. Health insurance is mandatory in Germany. Normally, employees automatically receive health insurance when they start working at a company if they have a legal contract. The health insurance documents must also be presented to the immigration authorities in Germany. That's very important. And then next step is the extension of the residence permit and also the settlement permit. Depending on the original length of stay, the residence permit may need to be extended. After several years of legal residence in Germany, and if certain conditions are met, a settlement permit, usually it's 5 years, can be applied for. And then that is the step if the people are here in Germany and they like to stay here also for longer time, is language courses and also integration courses. Language skills in Germany are often required or at least very helpful in order to be able to integrate better in Germany. Often the companies, they required that the skilled workers, if they're coming to Germany, they have to have enough language skills, at least I think B1 or B2. Integration courses also offer support in understanding German culture and our society. Support is available from the Federal Office for Migration. It's like it's called BAMF, and refugees, and the Federal Employment Agency. This step here is these two steps are not required. It's also not mandatory. I will show also some challenge. For example, the recognition of professional qualification is this procedure is too complex, costly, and also time consuming. Normally it needs around 3 to 4 months, but in reality, sometimes the authorities this is already need around, I think, 6 months, sometimes also 12 months. I have here some studies that they applied already, and they still didn't get this paper until 6, 7, 8 months, and that is also a big problem. There are many bureaucratic obstacles and long processing times and a lack of transparency in the visa and residence permit procedures. A lack also of networking between the authorities, like the authorities, the foreigner office with the consulates. That is also a problem, so that the communication is not really function sometimes. Another problem is also a challenge is not enough qualified German teaching staff in the countries of our origin. And learning the German language is also significant, a big problem also for the candidates. And there are also too few German companies who are recruit skilled workers from third countries. That the colleagues Herbert Brücker shows already the data about skilled people who are coming to Germany. It's really less. And another problem is also the authorities are understaffed and have a shortage of specialists who are also in charge of this topic. There's also a social controversy surrounding the issue of migration, and in some case, a negative attitude towards migrants among government employees. You see, authorities are a reflection of the society, and so we have also this kind of challenge also in the administrative procedure. They are my thoughts, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Tuan, for your very precise description on how it works, how to get into Germany. Thank you, because it's really a huge task to bring that together on paper. So
yeah,
and you said it needs 2 years to understand it. I fully understand that, and I think everybody in the field also. Torsten will speak about it also in a moment. But first we have Asa Akbari to speak about the Canadian side, how to get into the labor market, how does it work, what is the role of the provinces. Thank you, Asa.
Thank you. So are you able to see my screen here?
Yes, yes.
With the slide?
Perfect. Yeah, with the slide. You can put it on full screen if you like. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me for this presentation. I realize that we have very little time for this, so I will just go over quickly. Dan has already provided demographic context to immigration in Canada. The demographic changes that are taking place here have affected the regions differently. There has been uneven effect on Canadian regions. So, for example, in Atlantic Canada, which comprises of 4 provinces east of Quebec, natural growth has turned negative, and which has resulted in issues of aging, thereby raising concerns among the regional economic planners. And immigration is viewed as a regional economic development tool to mitigate the effects of aging.
The
1 in
slideshow
5.
is not moving. Could you?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I haven't yet. So 1 in 5 Atlantic Canadian is over 65. I will not say if I'm included in them. So the purpose of this presentation is to provide a general understanding of the policy of regionalization of immigration, rationale for government's role, and some outcomes in Canada. I include rationale for government's role, because I must say that some of these ideas I presented in a chapter that I wrote for a book that was edited by Klaus Zimmermann at University of Berlin, in which I compared Australia, Canada, Germany, US, and New Zealand. And I found that in some of them, the role of government was very minimal in immigrant settlement and integration. So here I will look at also what is the rationale for government's role from an economic perspective. To some facts here, the regional share of elderly population varies by the city size. The case for regional distribution of immigrants is based on regional demographics. And this table shows that the share of elderly is 17.5% of national population. But this share is higher than the national average in regions that do not include a very large or large city. Thus, smaller regions are more vulnerable to the economic challenges that attend an aging population. And we also looked at the share of foreign born according to geographical classification. Toronto being the largest city in Canada, about half of its population is foreign born. While in other cities, in other CMAs, it varies from 25% to about 8%. So more immigrants tend to settle in larger cities where there is greater economic opportunities and also where there is social and cultural environment. So the policy of regionalization it addresses the disproportionate numbers of immigrants who settle in larger and densely populated areas and provides support to smaller and rural areas that face demographic and economic challenges. Now, this policy fits in well with the government strategies at maintaining a regional balance in national economic development. And in Canada, we have many regional development organizations and government regional development agencies. For example, Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, or ACOA as we call, has a regional development mandate. So immigration also is one of the interests to the agency. And the policy of regionalization also helps prevent the economic and social consequences of private market failure. And we'll talk about that in a minute. There are three main components of regionalization policy. They include attraction, settlement, and retention. When we talk about attraction, it is aimed at attracting human capital to a region, which is similar to attracting business capital. If local governments or provincial governments want to attract business capital, they offer them some incentives. And similarly, to attract human capital, to attract immigrants, to attract labor force in the region, we offer some incentives, some policies. We adopt some policies to attract human capital. And the main scheme in this regard that we have is the Provincial Nominee Program, which was developed in 1990s in Manitoba first, and then followed along the similar lines in Atlantic provinces at the beginning of this century, implemented along the same lines as Australia's state-specific regional migration visa schemes. The second component is settlement, which is important to establish, of course, a settlement service network, because the immigrant networks lack in smaller areas. Principal elements for initial settlement of immigrants include information, language training, employment, financial stability, cultural integration, emotional support, health and housing. And in all these, the settlement organizations help with contributions from the government. What is the rationale for government's role? The Canadian system relies mostly on government funding. And why is that so? Because private markets are less motivated to provide these elements of settlement. And the reason for that is free rider problem. So once information about an area is available, the immigrants know where to go for the schooling of the kids, for healthcare, for housing, for other settlement issues. Once the information is available, everybody else can benefit from that. So there will be less of an incentive for private market, which is motivated by profit maximization. They need more revenues. There will be less motivation for them to provide this information because of the free rider problem. Once it is available to one, it is available to everybody for free of cost. And then there are also positive externalities associated with providing information. Furthermore, in smaller areas, the service provider organizations, SPOs, face an additional challenge in that they need substantial resources and expertise to apply for government funding. And the third component is retention. And I know that immigrant retention in smaller areas of Germany and the US are encouraged through universal employment-based schemes, while in Canada, provinces have their own economic integration programs that generally favor rural settlement, and rural pilot program allows local communities to sponsor economic migrants. And retention is affected by lifestyle and family-related reasons, which could be equally important for permanent visa holders. How effective has regionalization been? So the PNP has been effective in Canada in attracting immigrants towards smaller provinces who depend largely on PNP to meet the labor market needs. And there have been studies on this, including one by myself, in which we looked at how PNP has affected immigrant inflows to various provinces since their introduction. So these are my regression results. I won't go over those, but to look at what the overall outcome is, we notice that now different provinces signed the PNP agreements at different years and different points in time. So Manitoba signed PNP agreement in 1995, and Atlantic provinces got on board somewhere around 2010, and different provinces have different dates on this agreement. So what we noted was that in the pre-PNP period, provinces of Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, which is Atlantic Canada, and Ontario and Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan is Prairie Province, they had the same annual average arrival growth rates as Quebec. So Quebec was our reference province because Quebec does not have a PNP program. Quebec has its own immigration program, and it doesn't have a PNP program. So we compared with Quebec, and we found that these provinces in the pre-PNP period had the same annual average growth rates as Quebec, while British Columbia, Manitoba, New Brunswick, which is Atlantic Canada, and Prince Edward Island, which is also Atlantic Canada, had lower growth rates in pre-PNP period, lower than Quebec. But when PNP was introduced, it stabilized inflows in British Columbia, Manitoba, and Prince Edward Island, where it would have fallen otherwise relative to Quebec. And New Brunswick would also have experienced a declining trend relative to Quebec, but the PNP allowed it to grow more rapidly than Quebec. And same was true for Saskatchewan, which was keeping pace with Quebec pre-PNP. Alberta, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Nova Scotia, both NL and NS are Atlantic Canada. They did not experience any change in their trend and kept pace with Quebec, both pre and post-PNP. So while PNP has affected some has not had an effect on some provinces, but mostly in smaller provinces, it did have an effect. And we found a falling trend in Ontario relative to Quebec in the post-PNP period. So Ontario still receives the largest amounts of immigrants every year, but it has shown a fallen trend relative to Quebec in the post-PNP period, indicating a distribution of immigrant inflows away from Ontario to other provinces, because smaller provinces have become more active in attracting immigrants. They have now more voice in national immigration program through PNP agreements. And the province of Ontario was also the last to sign its PNP agreement with the federal government. This is my last slide before conclusion. So here I've shown population in Atlantic provinces from 96 to 2023. And you can see that in 2023, we exceeded 2.5 million, while before then, the population in 1996, for example, was about 2.3 million. So there has been a recent increase in Atlantic provinces, largely due to immigration from other countries, as well as from migration from other provinces of Canada. So these are some of my conclusions. Regionalization has become an important regional economic development tool, especially for smaller provinces. And an area have free rider problem and external benefits, which calls for the role of government in regional immigration policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Yeah. Thank you so much, Arthur. I would like to hand over immediately to Mr. Schley, and we have still Dr. Kelly and then Juliet Smith. So we speed up a bit, but we come back to the topic of regionalization, I'm sure about that. Dr. Schley, would you please step up with your slides?
Yes, I'm
Thank you.
just searching them.
You will understand that the German system is complicated after the slides of Tuan and Thorsten.
Yeah, yes.
Perfect.
Probably it is.
Full screen?
Yeah, one moment.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, thanks for inviting me to this webinar. I'm happy to hear all of these experiences, and I'm coming in a first step from a quite different angle, probably than until we heard within the last presentations. But I think it's very important that scientific angles differ. I brought you a quote out of one of my research projects I conducted within the last years on migrant organization and their role in the German welfare system. Now in another project, it's more not about migrant organization, but with migrant organization. On the right side, you see a social counseling situation in one of these organizations we work together with. It's not individualized. It's a group situation where people jump from table to table and try to translate and try to support each other. So it's not like case management or individualized cases there, but in one of our interviews, we had this quote. I just read it. With a migrant counselor, we first have to clarify how we communicate. We are a multilingual team. We orientate ourselves on the most common language in the neighborhood, but we don't cover all the languages. People often come with bags full of papers. It's usually about applications, school enrollment, child benefit, hearts, because it's not enough for one person to work in a family. The low pay, the many jobs, constantly changing jobs, get all the proof together. Many have no bank statements. Then it's about debts and debt collection. Someone orders a German TV guide, an overpriced credit card, or the third mobile phone contract on the street. Then seizures. The electricity is cut off. The flat is cancelled. The house is evicted. Writs of execution, notices. Then we have the employment and rental contracts. You wouldn't believe the contracts we see here. Yes, and then, takes a deep breath, finally, the residence law. Stories with the migration authorities in the case of toleration, fictitious certificate, withdrawal of freedom of movement, and it's always all in German. You see, it's in the first step, I wanted to change the angle and have a look at the challenges in which migrant counselors and in which migrants themselves are have to deal with in coming to Germany. And there, the labor market, maybe this is also something to make strong. The labor market is not seen as the goal of your individual activities. It's more overseen as a problem. Yeah, but I'll come to this back on later. I tried to figure out the structure in which this migration consolation is organized within Germany, and it's a federal structure on different scales. And until now, it's quite an easy picture, but it gets more and more complex, as Felicitas knows. The system of integration policies has quite a long history, but it's I'll start this history in 2005 when the federal government reformed the residence law and introduced an entitlement to language courses and migration counseling for migrants. It's section 43 to 45 of the Residence Act. They are integration related. The Youth Ministry and the Ministry of Interior finance a nationwide system of migration counseling for adult migrants as well as for young migrants. Currently, the budget for the next financial years has been significantly reduced due to other obligations. The federal migration counseling services are implemented by the umbrella welfare organizations. And one moment to have in mind, or I think it's important to have in mind, this strange structure of the German welfare system in a cooperatistic style of governance, especially in some sectors like these integration sectors. It's organized in a cooperatistic way. Coming to, you see, it's getting a bit more complex. In addition to this federal structure, the different federated states, the Länder, developed their own integration infrastructures. The biggest state, I only have the biggest state, but you have to imagine for this table that there are 16 different structures on this second level. Well, the state of North Rhine-Westphalia established so-called participation and integration law, and they finance 129 integration agencies. They are also implemented by the umbrella organization of welfare. And in recent years, there came a so-called municipal integration management. It's a system of case management. I think 363 persons in North Rhine-Westphalia guide people through the different obstacles with administrations, with foreigners' offices, and so on. On the municipality level, it became even more diverse. Municipalities themselves finance things like welcome points. It's called in the city of Düsseldorf, or in the city of Dortmund, it's called Lokal Willkommen. In the more rural districts, there is often only the financed infrastructures from the different from the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, or these integration policies. They are not not mandatory, so it depends on the political will and on possibilities of finances of the municipalities if they if they establish other structures. This is this field of integration policy. Somewhere in there, migrant organization can occur, but often they do not access, or they have problems to access and to compete with the big players in the welfare state. But that's not our issue now. But in this field, they can occur. Where they normally not occur is in the field of labor market policies. And the integration policies in labor market contexts. There we have a quite centralized, or relatively centralized structure, I would say. And we have these two schemes. It's the minimum income scheme in the second book of the social code, and it's the insurance system in the third book of the social code. Looking at these second book of the social code, it's mainly relevant for refugees, which can stay in Germany. They come in these local job centers in their realm, and normally the pathways for these people is to go into these integration courses. They were mentioned yet, and then to go maybe into another language course. These courses themselves, I only mentioned it in the yellow field on the right side. These courses, they are implemented not by the labor agency, but they are implemented by the Ministry of Interior. So what I want to show with this, we have a segmented field, and we have a field with overlapping governance structures, where it is more or less easy to access these market mechanisms which govern the integration structures, or where it is not this easy to access this corporatistic structures of governance. To have I think, well, it's quite a short overview about the different integration structures on different levels of government, or on different state levels. Trying to complete these pictures in 7 minutes, I think we can see these structures implemented by governance within a wider field of formal and informal support for migrants. Starting by friends and by transnational networks. I think migration studies have focused this within the last years. Going over migrant organizations, going to more or less informal brokers, or this field of informal brokers helping to access. Last week I've been talking to someone. If you buy such a broker, if you order such a broker, you have to pay 70 euros that he goes with you to the labor administration, for example. Then we have these private agencies, mainly supporting now third country national in the health sector. I heard a talk last week about migration from Colombia and from Mexico to Germany. I think it's not yet good described, but I heard a talk from a PhD student. Quite a lot of people just quit after they arrived in Germany, and they are very well accompanied by these agencies for a year, but after a year they have a hard fall. So this is out of a talk. I have no literature on this, but I think it's quite a new phenomena. And then you have an emerging field of very professional law firms. So if you're a big company, you buy your guidance to come into Germany. If you are very high qualified, I think you have no problems with administration. So it's also a stratified field we talk about. Probably it's a field you can come in with money. First this. Coming back to my initial quote, I'm doubting if we really need to more and more elaborate these integration infrastructures I pointed out. Maybe it's more time to talk about the structures on German labor markets, about all of this non-control of working conditions, all of these mini mini jobs and low wage jobs, which are producing very much obstacles to people working in this, also accessing social rights, social security system, health system. Maybe we should, or maybe not, there are different angles out of science, but coming from this angle I came from, I would say labor market integration is not a self-evident normative goal and success story necessarily. It's moreover about improving labor market structures. We maybe should have a look. Maybe this also would it make more attractive for people to come to Germany within the next years. But I think
Yeah.
that's
Thank you so much, Thorsten. I think that was a very good overview on the fragmented field of labor market integration we have. And I like your question about, do we need that? How to organize the field? This is what we are speaking about in this webinar. And we hope to learn from Melissa even better how it works in Canada. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Okay, it looks like the slides are up there. All right, so I'm going to talk. Can you hear me okay?
Totally fine. Everything
okay, perfect. I'm keeping my video off. Unfortunately, my internet connection is a little bit unstable. So today I'm going to talk about the settlement services provided in Canada and the system that we have in place. I do not represent the government of Canada. I'm here as an academic. However, I have worked for the government in settlement and integration policy, so that experience has definitely influenced my understanding of settlement and integration programming in Canada, but by no means am I representing the views of the Canadian government. I just wanted to say that at the outset. So could we please move to the next slide? So I'm going to just start by providing a brief overview of the settlement sector in Canada, and then I'll discuss some of the strengths and weaknesses of the Canadian approach. So as I know you're all aware by now, Canada has a very large number of immigrants, and the government of Canada really believes that immigration is a positive thing, but in order to maximize the outcomes of our immigration policy, we also need to invest in and support the people that come to Canada. So the Canadian government on the federal level invests around 1 billion Canadian dollars every year to support programming that basically aims to expedite the integration of newcomers. And the overall goals are to foster a sense of belonging to the country, but also to maximize the social and economic contributions of migrants. Next slide, please. So Canada has a very comprehensive service provision approach. In terms of direct services, the federal government funds all of the things on this list here and more. So just to highlight a few of them, needs and assets assessments and referrals. This is where an intake is done and immigrants are referred to services that might benefit them. Information and orientation, which is basically providing information on life in Canada. Language assessment and language training, that's pretty much self-explanatory. Community connections, this is all about creating welcoming communities by enhancing belonging and promoting social cohesion. And then employment-related supports, and this is what I'm going to focus on today. So basically, when it comes to employment, the goal is to help newcomers obtain work experience, connect with employers and professionals, and overall adapt their skills to the Canadian labor market. The services provided include mentoring and networking, employment and credential assessment counseling, and skill development and training. And obviously, there's a lot of different things that might fit in those three buckets. But in the interest of time, I think we need to move on. So next slide, please. The federal settlement program is based on a grants and contributions model, which basically means that the government signs agreements with organizations who deliver the services according to agreed upon requirements. There are more than 500 organizations holding these agreements at any given time, and most are nonprofit organizations. And these organizations vary a lot in type. Some are generic, offering services to all different types of newcomers, while some focus more on specific ethnocultural, linguistic, or faith-based migrant categories. Next slide, please. These agreements can be held for up to 5 years, and then you have to apply again for more funding. Well, the federal government clearly plays the leading role in the settlement and integration sector. There are other organizations either working independently or in collaboration with the federal government to meet the needs of newcomers. So I want to just briefly go over these. When it comes to employment programming, other federal departments such as Employment and Social Development Canada, ESDC for short, play an important role. Since ESDC is the department responsible for employment programming, they have some of their own programs that support the needs of newcomers, such as the Foreign Credential Recognition Program, for example, which, among other things, provides loans to newcomers who are in need of financial support as they navigate Canada's complex foreign credential recognition system. And I'd like to thank Dan for writing some comments about that in the chat, because I don't have time to go into too much detail. Since Canada is a very decentralized country, as I'm sure you have understood by now, you won't be surprised to learn that some provinces also provide their own settlement and integration programming. In some cases, this is just due to jurisdictional issues. For example, provinces are responsible for onboarding newcomers into health services, for example. But provinces may also try to fill gaps in terms of meeting the needs of newcomers that the federal government, for whatever reason, cannot meet through their programming. So through their own evaluation, they may make an assessment and decide that they need to provide funding for certain services. And in many cases, they also co-fund services with the federal government. Municipal governments tend to focus more on the needs of their local populations in general, not necessarily focusing on newcomer-specific services. However, they may also devise specific programs to support immigrants if they see the need. And some municipal governments are much more active in this space than others. For example, when it comes to engaging with local employers and businesses and encouraging them to hire newcomers. Some of the other key players in this space include issue-based organizations, such as those focused specifically on employment. These organizations often receive funding from multiple sources, federal and provincial. A good example would be employment agencies that offer specific services for newcomers, such as specialized employment-related language training, in addition to their regular programming for all Canadians. Schools and universities sometimes receive government contracts to deliver settlement services, but they also provide a lot of settlement supports to newcomers without actually government funding, because at present we have many international students, for example, coming to Canada, and it's the international offices at these institutions receiving the international students that often have to make up the difference when it comes to providing settlement and integration support. Okay, next slide, please. So obviously this is a big and complex topic, but I wanted to just touch on some of the limitations of our federal programs, since we're here talking about best practices and what works and doesn't work in different places. From a federal government perspective, and again, this is my own point of view, not the official view of the federal government, the settlement program cannot address some of the biggest challenges newcomers face in Canada because they lack the power to do so. So, for example, foreign credential recognition, to return to that issue, because it is a major challenge for many highly skilled newcomers in Canada. We have a very complex system, and the federal government can do very little aside from provide information and maybe some financial support to help newcomers navigate the system. But ultimately, power in this domain rests with the regulatory bodies, which are overseen by provincial governments. A second challenge concerns coordination between all the different stakeholders involved. Since service provision happens in partnership with so many different players, and the policy landscape is always changing and evolving, it can be very challenging for the federal government to stay on top of everything that's happening and to make the most efficient investments into settlement and integration programming. And of course, funds are always limited, despite the $1 billion investment into this sector. From the service provider perspective, the issues, unsurprisingly, are quite different. In my research, I've interviewed a number of service providers in different places. And when you ask them about their concerns, it's often that the federal government has too much control, not too little, but too much. Many feel that the funding they receive is not flexible enough to address the changing needs within their communities. And there's too many restrictions in terms of how the funding can be spent. Similarly, many feel that there's just too much emphasis on oversight, reporting, and that the focus of service delivery becomes more about outputs than outcomes. Reaching a minimum number of clients in order to receive continued funding to deliver a service, for example, is often a requirement, which causes service providers a lot of stress. And it really makes it hard for them to plan for the longer term. It should be obvious by now, thanks to the previous presentations. For example, Attar was talking about all the different regionalization policies that have been introduced in recent years. The immigration policy landscape is very dynamic in Canada and is always changing. And sometimes it's hard for the settlement and integration policy to keep up. So there's a couple of ways I would like to highlight that the current system is perhaps not as adapted as it could be to the current reality. And the first is that really the system was designed to support permanent residents. But this is problematic since, as Dan pointed out earlier, in recent years, there's been a growing number of temporary residents coming to Canada. And many of these are individuals who would like to transition to permanent residency. But since they're not eligible to receive federal supports, they kind of start in a negative position. By not receiving the supports they need early on in their settlement journey, they could experience long-term challenges if they don't get off to the best start in Canadian society. In many cases, provinces make up the difference. This is one of those gaps that provinces sometimes step in to fill, but even then there's often insufficient funding and resources. Another way the settlement program is poorly adapted to the current reality is that it's not well prepared to provide services to non-metropolitan areas. When the settlement program was designed, it was really meant to deliver services to a critical mass of clients residing in a specific locality. So usually the larger cities of Toronto and Vancouver, which have traditionally received large numbers of immigrants. But in the current context, as we know, many immigrants are going at increasing rates to smaller cities, where it's simply impossible with the current system to provide a full range of services due to low client numbers. So as a result, many immigrants must travel a long way to access services, and they may not be able to access them at all And this really puts a lot of pressure on service providers who usually have the best interests of newcomers at heart and will go above and beyond to meet the needs of newcomers, even without sufficient funding to do so. So last slide, please. So just to quickly wrap up, Canada is, of course, very good at attracting skilled migrants and is also committed to making immigration, and especially skilled immigration, work well. This is a point of pride for many Canadians. But still, as I've highlighted, there are also some limitations to Canada's approach, especially as things get more complicated in terms of our immigration policy. So I really believe that we have a lot to learn from other countries, including Germany, and I'm so pleased that we're having this conversation, and I hope we'll be able to continue having these discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for showing us the situation in Canada. Much appreciated. We have a last speaker, and I would like to invite her now, Juliette, and she will focus on what solutions could be to the difficulty of managing so many approaches and possibilities. Juliette, would you like to step up here?
Thank you so much for the invitation. Anna, do you have the slides ready to go?
We'll be there in a moment. I hope it's no problem that we need a bit more time. I think that's fine with all of us. Anna is working. Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Melissa, thank you so much for setting the stage. I think you alluded to so many topics that I can eliminate right now. So thank you so much for giving me at least a reduction of 2 minutes from my presentation. Today I will be talking about 4 topics, 4 brief topics on the settlement for Canada. The role of settlement organization in the integration process. Next slide, please. The local practical strategies that we do here. The support that we are using right now with AI, and experience from a practitioner in the field. Next slide, please. Canada is renowned for its diverse and inclusive society. We attract immigrants from all corners of the globe. Settlement organization plays a crucial role in the integration process of newcomers. We provide essential services such as language training, employment assistance, cultural orientation, which help immigrants and refugees adapt to their new environment. Organizations such as ours offer support in navigating healthcare, education, legal systems, fostering a sense of community and belonging. By addressing both practical and emotional needs, settlement organizations provide a smoother transition, promote social cohesiveness, and contribute to the overall success of newcomers in their new home. Some of the strategies, the next slides, please. And I'll briefly go over the strategies. Please move forward. We offer pre-employment services, language, cultural training, job matching and placement, skill development and training, mentorship and networking. Next slide, please. You can go through the slides as we go through. And when we talk about job matching, we can hold right there. That is my happy place, because total integration into Canada starts when somebody is working in a field of their expertise. And some of the strategies that we have used in the past have proven to be very successful. Now, when it comes to settlement organization, I can't speak for all provinces. our organization is a one-stop shop. So we do the entire family. So the case management is provided from the kids, from the adults, everyone is taken care of. So you're not going from one center to the next center to the next center. We might not be able to solve all the problems, like the federal recognition education will refer you to some other organization who does that. But we want, when you come to us as a unit, everyone gets what they need, whether it's the settlement, I need to find a place to live, I need healthcare, my language is not up, I need to learn English, we'll take care of that. When all that is taken care of, then we need to find jobs. And this is where we pride ourselves on giving our candidates or our clients the tools that they need to do that. We talked about mentorship and networking. We're all familiar with that. If you're not out there in a new country learning about industries, especially the ones that you have been trained in, then you need to do that. You need to connect with people in your own field and expertise. And then we talk about the future of work and how the role of AI have been helping us in both pre and post arrival. One of the most common phrases that our clients say to us now, I wish I knew then what I know now that they're here in Canada. This is where AI, taking all that feedback, next slide, please. AI will do the same services that we do post-arrival. Now it can do pre-arrival, that they can take ownership of their pathway into Canada by AI-driven tools, data analysts. What is it saying about the job market in Canada? Is there a need for a scientist or for an economics or a doctor, a lawyer, an IT engineer? Where is it? And which province is it that my skills would be required? Would I have a better opportunity if I went to Atlantic Canada than into Toronto? So those tools will be able to give you the best choices. Really, we need a more strategic approach when it comes to immigration, but that's for another topic right now. But taking small steps, and this can go into a further, which community could benefit from your skills rather than sticking right here in Ontario? So we're empowering the immigrants now to make more informed decisions about settling in Canada and where they could thrive better in Canada during their transition journey. Next slide, please. So again, recruitment and jobs, the ultimate outcome for integration in Canada is that job. And you can do all this pre-coming to Canada, analyzing all the job requirements with your profile and identifying suitable matches the same way. Now, employers tell us what they need from our participants. All this information is fed into the system, the AI system, and the match is done simultaneously. Employers know this person just came in the system, is a great match for your organization based on the skills and competencies that you have written to us about. And this enhances our efficiency and accuracy in matching our candidates. And then we take care of all the background information, the tools the candidates need, whatever training, whatever soft skills, whether it's social, emotional, communication skills, we take care of all that post-arrival and pre-arrival as well. How great is it when you come more prepared with what employers need? How great it is to be in a mentorship program prior to coming to Canada, how great it is to be networking with people in your field, whether it's regulated or non-regulated profession, how great it is to meet people before coming to Canada. Next slide, please. And again, we talked about the platform for the skills assessment and the personalized training path that you can take pre and post coming to Canada. So skills assessment and training, key components as well. Next slide, please. And again, we're talking about language. The Canadian language benchmark is what we use most to determine your level of English in Canada. How great would AI be to let you know even prior to coming to Canada what your language benchmark is and what the industry needs and what you need to take? What would be the needs assessment be for you? What are the gaps that you think in your background as it aligns to the Canadian work experience? And how can you fill those gaps before coming to Canada? AI will generate all that based on the needs assessments that are created and how your responses are to those questions. And then we get into the next slide, please. And we can always move forward when it comes to the practitioner. And this is all about me. And I'm so honored that I was able to talk about what we do. Melissa, you talked about so many high-level stuff, but being here on the ground and how creative we have to be when it comes to helping our clients because of the inflexibility most times of the government. We want to help everyone, but funding is one of we never have enough to do everything. Next slide, are we? Okay, I will talk about my final slide I'm going to talk about is the experience of a practitioner in the field. And I know for those listening, yes, I'm a manager of the employment division, but I get my hands on employment every single day because that brings me the greatest joy in my role. So practitioners in the settlement industry, like myself, are often immigrants, and we bring a unique perspective and understanding to our work. Some have founded NGOs dedicated to assisting new immigrants, and it is noteworthy that a significant portion of NGO staff are immigrants themselves or caseworkers. We have a shared experience, and we foster a deeper sense of empathy, cultural sensitivity, and firsthand knowledge of challenges immigrants face. You'll come across a multilingual organization when you are dealing with the practitioner. Of course, there's diversity and inclusion in all our institutions, but the impact of having immigrant practitioners and staff in these NGOs is profound. They can offer more relatable support, understanding the nuances of cultural adjustment, and navigating new systems. Our first-hand experience can provide invaluable insights into the specific needs and concerns of new immigrants. I have walked in your shoe. We can empathize. I've been there. And this leads to a more tailored and effective services, ranging from language assistance to employment guidance and social integration programs. Having immigrant practitioners and staff fosters trust and comfort among newcomers who feel more at ease seeking help from individuals who have walked a similar path. This can break down barriers to accessing services and encourage greater engagement in the settlement process. Overall, the presence of immigrant practitioners and staff in the settlement industry enriches the support system available to new immigrants, making tangible differences in their transition and integration into their new communities. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for your hands-on experience, insights, very much appreciated. We still have very little time, and I would like to ask Howard to say a few words and to conclude the webinar, if that's fine. Or if you have comments or questions, come up with that.
Well, thank you, Felicitas. I know we are well over time, and so I'll just keep my remarks very brief. When I began today, I made some comments about how at some levels, Canada and Germany share a great deal, certainly with regard to our intentions. But what we've learned today is that in the details, and particularly, I would say, at an administrative or operational level, things are quite different between our two countries. And I think that one thing that I was astonished by is the level of bureaucracy that is involved in the systems, not only in Germany, where Torsten made it very clear that we have an astonishing array of levels of administration, but as well in Canada, thanks to all of the speakers. Now, it seems to me that what we're trying to do with these webinars is to help governments understand the situations that they are in. And one thing that I think it's always useful for governments to note is that they are in an increasingly competitive environment. Many countries are facing demographic decline. Many countries are facing challenges with respect to their labor markets. And as a number of people has made clear, and I'll just mention Ather in particular, this is an area of competition, and governments need to figure this out. And it seems to me that one thing that they're going to have to do is pare back some of the administrative requirements that they impose on immigrants to make it much easier for them to not only arrive, but to settle and integrate. And I think that one of the points that I will take from Juliet's last presentation is the potential that artificial intelligence has to help this process before the immigrants even arrive. And it would be very nice for our governments to start incorporating some of these measures in addition to what the civil society organizations are going to be bringing in. So I will simply end by thanking all 7 of our speakers for their thoughtful presentations, for having taken the time to think through what they felt that we needed to hear, for compressing what could in each case have been, at least an hour's worth of presentation into a very brief format. I want to thank you again, Felicitas, you, Anna, for putting this together. And I look forward to more webinars from the NUPS network. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You have seen that there was something going on in the chat, and I would leave it like that. Is there anybody who wants to clarify a question?